Hi guys, welcome to Snakes and Adders. This is the next instalment of our advanced snake keeping series. This is an emerald tree boa. I'm incredibly excited to be doing this video. This is one that I've wanted to do for a long time along with the green tree pythons. Emerald tree boas are the ultimate snake for a lot of people. They're anything but straightforward. Hopefully by the end of the video you'll be slightly more appraised of some of the issues that can face them and hopefully a bit more prepared. And if you do decide to keep one, you're advanced enough to keep one by your own volition and choice. So, emerald tree boa, Corralus caninus, first described by Linnaeus in 1758. It went through a number of different names. I have a list here. I'll try to pronounce them as best I can. Boa canina, Boa hypnale, Boa thassalina, Boa auranticulata, Boa exegia, and then Xiphossoma aramboia, Xiphossoma canina, Xiphossoma caninum, Boa canina once again, and finally Corralus caninus by Boulanger in 1893. So we're mainly concerned with the northern derivatives of the emerald tree boa. So these would be Suriname and Guyana localities, which are the ones that are imported with relative regularity into the UK, US and European markets. They also occur in Colombia, Brazil, Venezuela and French Guiana. These regions towards the northern parts of the range are referred to occasionally as the Guyana Shield or Guyana Shield. So you may have seen that name listed. We've used it to list these Guyana Shield emerald tree boas. There is a basin variety that exists, which is a larger, rarer, altogether more expensive animal to find and keep. These have now been classed as Corralus batesi, and it makes it distinct from these guys in the northern region, which they used to be grouped with. They occur, as the name suggests, along the track of the Amazon basin, and that would be through the southern regions of Suriname, Guyana, Venezuela to Colombia, Peru and Brazil. The name Batesii is in honour of Henry Walter Bates, who is an English naturalist, and he was revered for his work with butterflies in Brazil. And then also there is a term called Batesian mimicry, which is in his honour as well. And Batesian mimicry also shows itself in reptiles, and the best example I can give is milk snakes pretending to be coral snakes as a defence mechanism to avoid predation. So, you know, this guy was relatively active in herpetological circles as well. At some point, I do have to mention the elephant in the room, which is how much this guy looks like a green tree python, according to every book you'll ever read on emeralds and green tree pythons. And then when you see them up close and personal, they're totally different. And they're different to keep as well, but we'll get to that. Sorry my darling, I breathed on you. Didn't mean to wake you up. So, having avoided a shot to the face, I shall now try not to shit myself again. So, the fact that the green tree pythons, they occur in Papua New Guinea, islands around Papua New Guinea and Irian Jaya in extreme northern Australia. They are also green. They go through an ontogenic colour change after about a year to 18 months of age, the same as the emeralds do, from similar colours that the emeralds were prior to the change. And, sorry, you have to forgive me because I keep moving around. I don't want to get too close to her face. They are almost exclusively arboreal. They are in lower lying bushes to begin with. They go up into the canopy as adults. They have similar predation techniques. So there is a list of some similarities there. The fact that two very distantly related animals solved life's issues and problems the same way we refer to as convergent evolution. Two separate animals on opposite sides of the earth presented with the same problems to solve came up with the same stratagems to be able to cope with what life had thrown at it. And emerald tree boas and green tree pythons are probably the flagship pair of species for convergent evolution. I did make a note of some others upon looking on Google. And the North American pronghorn and the Old World antelope are an example of convergent evolution. The anteater and aardvark are convergent evolution, and the marsupial sugar glider and placental flying squirrel are also examples of convergent evolution. In captivity, however, barring the obvious visual similarities, the emerald and green trees are chalk and cheese. Green tree pythons, whilst not a beginner species by any stretch of the imagination, are far easier to raise, get feeding, etc. than emerald tree boas. So what is it that complicates their care? What are the common issues? How can we try and manage this species? So, as a quick fire list, fussing them, not leaving them alone. Picking the wrong area of the house to keep them in, high traffic areas for example. Not allowing adequate settling in time, dehydration through not bowl drinking or excessive heat. Excessive heat on its own is an issue. Regurgitation as a result of low humidity and high temperature. Constipation as a result of low humidity and high temperature. Broken teeth as a result of badly designed enclosures or hitting the feeding tongs. Broken teeth that lead to stomatitis that also lead to respiratory infections. You can see a pattern forming here, I'm sure. Internal and external parasitic burdens. Rushing to deal with internal parasites too soon. Assuming that the captive bred baby is immediately just as easy as an Amazon tree boa, and realising that they're only modestly easier than their wild caught counterparts to raise, that is. And also realising that captive bred baby will take years and years to mature for you to be able to breed from it. So, certainly in the case of females anyway, males will mature somewhat quicker. Most of the notes and most of the stuff in this video is going to be in reference to wild caught animals, simply because there's more of them circulating than captive bred babies. So regardless of breeders telling you how easy they are, and I've seen some really crazy stuff, and it's always the breeders who are producing them that'll tell people, oh yeah, they're not that hard, they're okay. Well mate, you've got a dozen of them to sell, so were you ever going to tell the truth and tell them that they were a pain in the arse? No, you weren't. Let's be completely straight. You know, we make a habit of just being blunt and telling the truth here, and I'm going to be no different with the emerald tree boas at all. So, you know, how are we going to set them up? We're going to set them up with an arboreal enclosure with a relatively cool basking temperature when compared to green tree pythons. Top perch temperature of 30 Celsius max, ideally with multiple perches available to pick varying temperatures within the vivarium. Ideally glass or plastic enclosure, as this will we will be spraying regularly in an attempt to get them to coil and droplet drink initially. A wooden viv would just rot in short order. These snakes are crap at drinking out of bowls to begin with, and that's one of the main causes of dehydration, along with internal parasitic burdens. So certainly in the case of acclimatizing animals, sadly the most predominantly available, they should be maintained in a simple, easily cleaned vivarium. With removable perches, consider a thick type of parrot ladder, length from front bottom to top rear. This makes removal of the sleeping snake a doddle, and they will just stay asleep. As you can see, she's relatively stable and quiet. It's only when I breathed heavily on her that she reacted. They will stay fast asleep. You can lean them up against the work surface and they'll just stay there whilst you're cleaning the tank and doing the maintenance, and then you can pick them up and pop them back in. So the basic substrate would be orchid bark, core, mix of the two, or even paper. Some people don't use anything. They will just maybe have a shallow pool of water on the floor. It wants to be simple. We do not want to use a bioactive enclosure which is full of pathogens and background pathogens that could affect the immunoresponse of an already stressed animal that is still desperately trying to settle into captive life. So we must try and balance out. I want for it to be in a pretty aesthetic, wonderful bioactive tank, and the fact that you'll absolutely kibosh its immune system. So let's just be realistic. This snake potentially has enough shit to deal with without having to deal with a pathogen burdened enclosure. You know, we need something clean where we can take it back down to basics, to its fundamentals, and build it back up again. So heating can be provided by deep heat projector, ceramic bulb, power plate, and it must be controlled by a high quality reliable thermostat. So to look at temperatures more closely, I'm sorry I keep looking away from the camera, but I made a lot of notes with regards to the emeralds, not necessarily from care sheets, but information that I feel is pertinent that people miss out. And I've gone about this in other videos to try and explain it in the past, but I think with emeralds it's particularly important. One, try and be as honest and straight as possible. Two, that it's as clear as possible. And three, that the information provided is from nature, not just from what Dave, Bob or Mick thinks online. So to look at the temperature more closely, let's for a moment consider the regions of origin. In research for this video, I looked at climographs for Georgetown in Guyana and Paramaribo in Suriname. So yearly daytime high fluctuation was 29 to 31 for Georgetown, 30 to 33 for Paramaribo. So I'm going to just say G and M, okay? Yearly median fluctuation was 26.1 to 27.6 for GT, and then 26 to 29 for PM. Yearly nighttime low fluctuation was 24 to 25 for GT, and then 23 to 24 for PM. Day lengths were relatively stable at between 11.7 hours and 12.5 hours for GT, 11.8 hours and 12.4 hours for PM. The wet season, which was seasons with over 220 mil of rainfall, was May to August for both areas. The dry season, if you can call it that, basically under 120 mil, was September to October for GT and September to November for PM. So to be able to advise care sheets and even videos like this are not truly necessary if you have a dollop of common sense and access to biome and climate data to which the animal's country of origin. The rest just falls into place. I've just read you the temperature range. These graphs are easily found. 30 seconds searching on Google. You have rainfall, relative humidity, daytime high, median temperature, nighttime low. Well, this is all the shit that you need to know as a snake keeper anyway. So it is just common sense. Who cares whether someone thinks they're hard or easy to keep? Who cares whether I think they're hard or easy to keep? The point is, as an advanced keeper, you are experienced enough to be able to discern your own care and come up with your own methods and plans to be able to keep these snakes. So by keeping our animals too warm and dry, a byproduct of generally being overheated, gurgitation and constipation become issues. They can become syndromes that can spell the undoing of your captive. We maintain our emeralds at a daytime high of 29 to 30 and a nighttime low of 26 to 27. Then they have the option to migrate from these sites to cooler temperatures. Through experience, we have found that any hotter than this and they start spewing and showing the issues that we've discussed. That is probably the biggest reputation emeralds have got. They spew up, they get constipated, they drop dead. People keep them like green tree pythons because green trees top perch we keep at 33, whereas we're saying 29 to 30 for the emerald. It dries them out, they bung up, they can't pass their stools, they spew, so there's all sorts of problems going on. So just err to the side of caution. A lot of South American animals prefer cooler temperatures. Bear this in mind. In the case of wild-caught animals, hydration is more important than food initially. So probiotics are essential in both the form in bath form and drinking water form. We need to replace electrolytes, salts and amino acids lost through stress. Once we've hydrated our animals, invariably they will shed after the past few weeks they've had to endure being packed and shipped and held and all this sort of stuff. So maintain high humidity to ensure that the animal is capable of shedding well. Quite often they will arrive with nicks and bumps and abrasions that the animal will try to rid itself off. This may take 2 or 3 sheds to fully do. Do not lose hope. The presence of external parasites is also commonplace. Mites are regular occurrence and both quarantine and treatment are needed. Ticks tend to be more the preserve of the Amazon tree boa. I've never seen a wild-caught emerald tree boa with ticks, but I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Treatment with Callingtons or Frontline or the use of Vapona or Diclorvos strips can be used. Oil dipping can be done on first arrival. It is effective but more hands-on and therefore more stressful for the animal, so bear that in mind. Upon arrival of your new snake, it's worth having a look at the teeth and the gum line of your new snake. Emerald tree boas shed teeth, so they naturally shed teeth. These lay in the gum line. They also get snapped off and stick into the gum, which can lead to mouth infections, which are a pain in the ass to treat. And with a stressed new arrival, this is beyond the power of many keepers to save them. So if we've got one that we're already desperately trying to bed in, and then we end up with a mouth infection or an RI that's spread from a mouth infection, it's pretty much curtains. And that's actually probably a pretty common way of these to go. People put them in busy tanks, they spoil them rotten with all these perches. So basically there's more places for them to smash their teeth on when they miss their rat. Their aim can be shit, even though they've got all these heat pits, they're still daft. They go for your hand instead, you move it out of the way, they end up hitting a perch, they smash 2 of their front teeth, they go into the gum line, sit there a couple of days, before you know it, you've got all this caseous cheesy material in the gob, mouth won't sit shut properly anymore, and then that goes to an upper and then worst off lower respiratory infection, and it does not have the immunoreserves to be able to deal with the antibiotics required to clear the infection, and basically it's a slow descent into death. So that sounds heavy, sounds harsh, it's supposed to be. This is advanced, it's not your beginner or intermediate, you're into the big boy shit now, deal with it. It's an emerald, it's not a corn snake. Where you have your tank is important. A high traffic area is a no-no. Living room, landing, kitchen, not a good idea. The temperatures may not be stable enough owing to the relatively shallow temperature gradient, and they're best suited to a keeper with a room devoted to reptiles. This by definition tends to be the more adept, long-term keepers. The ability to keep up the room, to close up the room, with no visitors for vast periods of the day, apart from for maintenance runs and checks, is perfect. The background heat from the other vivs gives us a constantly warmer room and therefore a higher cool end temperature, bringing it to the tropical realm, where evaporation and therefore humidity are more easily maintained. How do you get evaporation if it's the only animal in a room? Yes, you can heat a perch to 30 degrees, but the bottom of the tank is clock cold, it's room temperature. There will be no evaporation taking place. Bear this in mind. It's not that I'm being elitist by saying that it has to go into a reptile room. It has a mechanical purpose in warming the air, agitating the water molecules and getting them to evaporate and create the humidity we do so desperately need to get this jungle snake to shed its skin properly. Again, common sense, but it needs spelling out for some reason. I don't get it. Never lose sight of the fact that this is an advanced level snake. It can kick you in the balls along the way, and if it can, it will. Be prepared, react to issues, make no bones about it. This is not an easy to look after snake, and I don't care who's telling you that they are. Certainly those who breed them and looking to sell them, they're more complex than people let on, and we would sooner tell you the truth. So now it's been treated for mites, ticks, and it's had its mouth inspected, leave it the hell alone. Barring water and sprays, ignore it. The fastest way to kill an emerald is to fuss it, leave it to its own devices for 2 to 3 weeks. Hopefully at this point it'll have shed. Don't panic if it doesn't. It may be slightly malnourished and it might require a meal to be able to shed its skin. But even if it hasn't shed its skin, we're not going to feed it before 2 to 3 weeks anyway. And then we'll attempt to feed after 2 to 3 weeks. I see people panic about prey size, but in truth these snakes have huge heads, as you can see. And the size of the prey isn't really the issue, it's the temperature that the animals are maintained at. People conflate the regurgitation and spewing up with giving them big meals. It's bollocks. They don't spew up because you've given, such as this female, a large wiener rat. She'd be absolutely fine with a large wiener rat, no problem at all. The issue that we have is that they're too hot, then they spew, they dry out, all the rest of it. So I did make a note here. The problem we face is we don't feed it again until it poops. So if we know all systems are working, if you give it a tiny mouse, will it need to poop after you've fed it? $1 million question. Do we feed it a little mouse that doesn't shift anything that's already inside its gut? Or a bigger meal that might help to flush it through? So at which point a good sized meal will encourage any other fecal material or urates to be passed. If they have not done already, ideally we want to know the tract is working as it should. Constipation and regurgitation are still things regardless of the meal size. So if we're going to have a regurgitation issue, is it less problematic to regurgitate the mouse we gave it? It's still regurgitated it. It's got next to no goodness from it. It's obviously got an upset stomach that we need to work on. So at which point I'd sooner take the risk and give it that meal that it looks like it deserves. And more than likely, after basically 6 weeks of not eating and being dehydrated, it desperately wants as well. So, you know, a slightly larger meal is more likely to produce something at the other end. We would only attempt a feed every 3 weeks initially for the first 6 months, and depending upon bowel movements, this may be shortened slightly to every 15 to 18 days. You will have to become a turd inspector, and potentially you're going to need to make notes about how it poos and how it wheezes, as well as how it feeds and how it sheds. This is not something a green tree python keeper needs to worry about, but an emerald tree boa does. You're going to have to think about this. Emerald tree boa temperaments generally are relatively calm and not as strike happy as their lighter bodied cousins, the Amazon tree boas, and as long as we don't touch them and annoy them, we're okay to work around them and just admire them from a distance, which I think at this point this beautiful girl has proven. She's been incredibly tolerant of me, this annoying tit from Sheffield, doing a video on her, and she's not reacted too badly apart from me blowing on her to begin with and me jumping out of my skin. So, you know, praise be to the calm emerald temperament. As long as you don't touch them, you can work around them, and it goes for green trees as well. There's no reason to handle this snake. I have no reason to handle it apart from for medical reasons or initial inspection reasons. There is a real risk of kinking, which is to the tail. This lovely arboreal tail holds on tight around the branches. These linkages can easily be smashed by big daft humans that are too rough when handling. This can lead to kinking of the tail. It can affect the way the sexual organs work, and in extreme cases can lead to prolapse. I neither support the handling of green trees or of emerald tree boas. Some people aren't going to like that. I don't care. So that said, push your luck with an emerald tree boa and you'll regret it. This species has the longest teeth of any non-venomous snake. I've seen a full-on bite whilst unpacking a wild-caught shipment about 15 to 18 years ago with Paul at another shop that he worked at. And Dave, who was working with Paul, had just finished oil dipping a snake to treat it for the external parasites. It whipped round and bit his forearm. It was a full-on bite, probably only lasted for about a second or so. There was no real fuss. Dave was slightly mental in that regard and it didn't really bother him. But he then put the snake into the cage, and then I looked at his hand about 30 seconds later, and there were two angry purple hematomas forming on either side of his forearm that looked like half a golf ball had been inserted under his skin. I've never seen a reaction to a bite like that in my life. They must have gone really deep, and you can see these massive muscle structures behind the eyes. They ain't messing when they bite. So underestimate an emerald tree boa. Bite at your peril. It is not something that I would encourage you to try and experience, believe me. Plus the obvious risk of snapping teeth in your skin and the subsequent infection to the snake. The fact that you might get an infection, I couldn't give a shit about. You were stupid enough to free handle your emerald, dipshit. So, but yes, we're going to keep our emeralds hands off. We're not going to fuss them any more than we need to. The rest of their care is kind of up to you. By keeping an emerald, you are the following. You're capable of working all this out yourself due to your experience. You can work through the situations and problem solved. You're adept at undertaking basic medical tasks and administering them to your animal. You probably have years of experience to draw upon, and everything covered in this video is common sense, and to everything that I have said so far, you've pretty much gone, duh, of course. So, you know, the video is more maybe for people aspiring to get there one day. And with time you will, but don't rush it. These snakes do not forgive cock-ups. I know this. They will quickly expose overconfidence. To keep these animals, you must be confident in your ability to keep advanced species, and that confidence must be based in reality. Captive breeding takes time and many years of patience. whether it be wild caught or captive bred, you are still to raise a female to a position where you want to put it through the stress of breeding, gestation and birth. Gestation is long and the impact on the female is not to be underestimated. They look like hollow bags once they've given birth, and you know, for an animal that stresses easy, that's a lot of pressure to put a female under. And you know, if they were anywhere near as easy as some of the breeders would have you believe, we would be tripping over them like corn snakes at the reptile show. Ask yourself the last time you saw one, if you've ever seen one. It may well be years before you see one. That is a true indication of how easy they are. The fact that predominantly they are still imported and not captive bred is an indicator of how difficult these animals are. You only have to look at the facts, use your brain and apply common sense. If they were easy to keep, everybody would have one. As such, we have made an advanced video, which the advanced keepers will take zero notice of because they knew it all already. To everybody else, yeah, you're going to get there, but these are a snake that is serious business. It can all go wrong incredibly quickly. And like when we sell emeralds, especially as imports, we sell them with zero guarantee. To take one is an admission that you know what you're doing and that you accept the risks. It is what it is. We're going to keep the videos coming. I'm sorry I've looked all over the place, but there's that many notes to try and fit in. I wanted to make sure I got this one right. It's really important to me that this one's, you know, on mark. So we'll keep them coming. Visit the website, which is www.snakesnadders.co.uk, and see what we're all about. Cheers.